Hi. Cool. So yeah, I was asked to talk about our work on the miner index today. Though I'm feeling like I really want to talk about our new project because there's so many cool sort of side conversations about pieces that we're interested in tackling. And so I'm looking forward to doing this again. Hopefully, if one of the follow-ins on this is another meetup. But yeah, so the miner index. So the motivation of the miner index, if you're not familiar, we build PowerGate, and so PowerGate is sort of a library that runs on top of Lotus, allows you to has some opinions about how you can manage data moving back and forth between Filecoin and IPFS. It also has some helpers to help you make deals, and one of those helpers is you can create arrays of trusted miners, and you can set parameters on creating deals with a certain amount of replication, and then PowerGate will go to work to store that number of replicas across all your trusted miners. And so if any of the miners turn down your deal, it will move on to the next miners. Those sorts of simple tools are built into it. But we did a lot of work on actually, so then what happened is we have a hosted system called the Textile Hub. And on the Textile Hub, we have users that are creating folders, directories of data. And we wanted to help them move that data to Filecoin. And to do that, it moves through a PowerGate that runs on the hub. And so when we were exposing all those systems, we realized that we really wanted to improve the success rate of the deals going to Filecoin. These are all online deals. And one of the big challenging pieces, both in the usability and the success rate, was just finding really good miners that are currently active on the network that are likely going to accept your deals. And so the first stop in that journey was actually to do a lot of sort of testing with people on the Filecoin team and kind of try to figure out what our workflow should look like. And then the next stop was how do we collect all the information about miners on the network and put that together in a way that our users could tap into easily and other people could tap into as well. And that's where the miner index came from. And so the miner index is actually, in its core, it's built into PowerGate. So anybody that runs PowerGate can be collecting a lot of information about the miners on the network. And so it will use both on-chain data and attach a lot of additional metadata on top of every miner from the view of the PowerGate. And then we also run this on the Textile Hub and expose it on as a public API. And so telemetry, well, we'll get into all of that. So we expose this as an API. I can share the URL over the Zoom call in a minute. And Ignacio is, I think, on the call still, although it's kind of late for him, but he's the mastermind behind a lot of these pieces. And so he's here to answer questions on chat as well, I hope. But so the miner index, here's open API spec, Swagger spec, so you can go to it and you'll find that it has basically every miner on the network, and you can look at their sort of history of creating deals. But this is really from the Textile perspective. There's some on-chain information, and it will collect information about their storage prices and all those, and you can filter through that. But then it also has the perspective of the Textile PowerGate's history with these miners. So you can use it through the API, this open API, or you can actually download a CLI and use it on your desktop or in your any tooling. You can actually script that and build into other things. And so you can see here's a nice sample of the data that comes back when I get the information out of the index for a single miner. And you can see that it has their advertised costs. But then down below, you can actually see this sort of hint of the deal-based metadata that will come back. And so the original intention here was we knew there was a constraint around our perspective of the network versus what another client's perspective of the network, which is a challenge I'll bring up later. But you can see in the index, it's actually exposing region-based perspectives. And our thinking was we would always run multiple of these nodes that could collect the telemetry about miners from multiple different regions. So you could find the region closest to you and get telemetry information that was most relevant for selecting your miners. And you can query it, and you can sort by a lot of different information. And so actually, if I just jump over in some collaborations with Jimmy, actually, I put together this little observable that just shows how to use the API. Quite simple. I'll share this link as well, but pretty nice. Like obviously open API. So then I just do a bunch of JSON filtering. I find just the miners that are advertising free storage for verified clients. I find miners that are accepting less than a certain threshold of data size. And then I list out the top 8. And so that way, or here I have a function just to get the top 1 at any moment in time. The default sorting in the miner index is actually based on our last successful deals with the miner. And so that's meant to help end users find currently active miners and really kind of relevant latest index data. Right, so there's that. And yeah, and so filtering, all that sort of good stuff. So this is an old screenshot, but you can see again some different samples. And this is actually this is still a subset of the data, but just kind of fit nicely in the UI here. Also interesting in the index, you could get per miner stats. And so in the tool, for example, I can get all the latest stats for a single miner here. And that will give me all the telemetry, but also all the deal history that we've observed with that miner. And so the telemetry will give you things like the transfer speeds that we saw, which are pretty helpful for other users of our system to find good miners for their deals. And then another thing in there that we thought was very useful that we had intended to build into some nice user interfaces as well is just simple deal calculators, but specifically deal calculators that would facilitate deal creation. So, so I can put in the parameters of a deal that I want to make, and I can list a set of miners that I found on the index that I want to make deals with. And then I can get all the calculated costs, but also I can get these outputs for some of the tools for how I can quickly turn that calculator output into a real request for storing the data with that miner. Right, so then finally I can actually just copy paste it in this example. And here you can see I'm using the tooling on the Textile hub to move directories to Filecoin. And here I'm just doing an on-the-fly update of my storage parameters to set it to these three miners that I found with fast retrieval flagged. Yeah, so here's just kind of a zoom in on the way that works, but we don't actually have to get into that. I can share these slides. But I thought maybe most interesting to this group, because this is out there and very ready for people to use. And Jimmy showed one example of some of the things that he's done exploring this, and he has a couple of good ones. But I thought maybe it would be really useful for this group to actually talk about some of the challenges that we saw with this going forward. And so the biggest and most obvious one is that like collecting data doesn't equal reputation, and we can say that, and miners will definitely say that. But one thing that we found, for example, is miners filter for clients. This is a great case where this is true. Just because a miner makes a deal with us and we measure them as being high quality or high speed doesn't mean that another miner or another client is even necessarily going to get a deal with them at all. And then the telemetry is very affected by temporal load on clients. And this is something our latest work is actually trying to improve quite a lot. So there's a problem, right? Is if a lot of people start using our index and all continuously have good experiences with the same miner, this can actually be bad for the miner because they're going to not be able to have much control over their load. So they're going to have to either turn down deals or fail to get deals on chain quick enough. And so there's a funny mismatch here between motivations. Yeah, and then things like properties like the miner location. We actually use the MaxMine database to do IP matching of all the miners on the network and create locations. But this is a pretty brittle field that seems probably gameable, and so those kind of things would be very nice to figure out better ways of collecting them. And yeah, we haven't really focused on retrievals and getting that data in here. So that would be a next step if we're going to take this. But I think a lot of this is going to be leapfrogged by the work that Mike is going to talk about, and work that I think Digital Mob is working on now. But hopefully a lot of this can inform that and then catch up to where they get to. But yeah, like miners feedback was a little bit scared at first when we started pushing this, and some of it was valid. Like back to the point of if we increase load on a single miner, it actually can just cause factors that are hard for them to deal with, or external factors can lead to them showing up as bad in a reputation index. The way that online deals work, that can be really tricky, and so taking that into consideration. The second set of challenges are really around the disconnect between reputation, what you really want to get out of an index like this, and the economics of Filecoin. That there's kind of a mismatch here that is only loosely connected. So just some examples, details within there. The prices that are advertised by miners that they're accepting deals at aren't necessarily going to reflect what you're going to get. What you're going to get on your final deal. That can have a lot of reasons, but Filecoin itself is a very volatile market. And so that can be really tricky, and miners are going to be a lot slower at adjusting what their costs are to the market rates of Filecoin. And so you have to account for that when you're looking at an index like this that's somehow it's supposed to be a source of truth. So that can be pretty tricky. So like knowing the true, and then also that leads into how you convert this back to your understanding of like US dollars. How much am I really paying for the price? And there's a lot of other like kind of more meta issues there to solve that, but that's there. And then, yeah, and so this actually gets back to the point of if this index were being used by a lot of clients and putting a lot of pressure on the best miners, a small miner might show up on the index and actually be their quality might be reduced by that. And so there's something tricky there. It needs to be figured out because of that mismatch between the incentives and the data that's shown here. Yeah, and that leads into this problem, which is being something like a kingmaker, which is the exact thing I keep saying, which is like if the miner is used and successful at highlighting a single really good miner that people keep finding in the index, it's just going to create them, make them better and better and better in the index potentially. Is that a bad thing for the Filecoin network? I'm not sure. I guess there could be arguments either way, but something to think about with these kind of consolidated views. The third challenge is again around the economic discontinuity, but the reputations aren't driven by the economic incentives yet. So like there's like no miner really minds so much about this. They really are focused on how they're performing on the things they have to do on chain. And so that's something to consider, is how we can bridge reputation to the on-chain activities more closely. And then, like, I keep wondering this about many different competing reputations, is how do we rank the reputation makers? There's no reason somebody has to trust Textile as being honest here. And that's a really tricky thing to figure out. And then we didn't put a reputation on our system. It's really an index, because the fair like scoring system doesn't seem obvious to me. And at least yet, I think that there's obviously some good proposals out there. But making miners feel like they're being measured in a fair way is pretty important. I think many of them are working really hard to make the network better. So how do we actually like treat them in a fair way so that they show in these index in a good way? And then obviously not to add tricks to the index. That's a challenge. Like we could layer in tricks to try to make the reputation, a reputation system here, but those tricks are going to often be matched by the tricks of the miners themselves, because if they end up then having the incentive to be showing up as high quality in the index, that just creates a game. So those were kind of the sample of challenges that we kind of debrief on this project and started thinking, how do we get to the next level here and think through how do we really organize high quality miners to accept our deals in a like high success rate sort of way. And that's what I want to talk about next time. So we'll get there. And then the last point is just that there's this additional problem that our index, for example, only knows the miners, that it's made deals with, and it knows all the miners that are on chain, but things like telemetry are really tricky from our point of view, because we have to then go spend Filecoin and spend a lot of time testing every miner that we find. And we didn't set it up to do that on this first version. It's something that could be done. But again, I think that some of these other projects are going to leapfrog where we got to. So hopefully we'll all learn something from them. But yeah, that was our miner index project. It's still running. Definitely, we're still collecting data, lots of good stuff there until people leapfrog us. I think that there's a lot of cool stuff to build on here. And ideally this will migrate into the next group of standards wherever we go next. So hopefully that's helpful.